bad. All right, I want to start off with what is the Farm Bill, because I don't know what everybody knows about it already, and I know that it's just this thing that gets talked about politically, and people write about it, and they have this opinion or that opinion, but some people aren't even sure what it is. So what is the Farm Bill? Very briefly, it's legislation that Congress passes every 5 to 6 years, and it sets our agriculture and food policy. It funds the farm subsidies, which is probably something that you've heard about and the controversy around it, and the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as SNAP. Basically, it's a huge spending bill. And the history of the Farm Bill is it began in 1933 as part of the Agricultural Adjustment Act under FDR. And this was during the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl, and farmers were in absolute crisis. So there was this urgency to do something, and they did. And what they did created and set the foundation for farm subsidies, loan programs, and SNAP, or supplemental nutrition. All right, so fast forward almost 100 years, and the last Farm Bill was 2018. It was funded through fiscal year 2023. That was when Congress was supposed to pass the next Farm Bill, but that didn't happen. What they did instead was they passed a continuing resolution to keep things funded through 2024 on the same level as the 2018 Farm Bill. And that same thing happened again in 2024 and 2025. So certain things are currently funded through September 2026, but they are funded at 2018 levels. And we all know the economy has done loop-de-loops. So some things just aren't matching up. All right, so now we have this year's Farm Bill, which allocates money for fiscal years 2027 through 2031. But some of the projections are extending it for 10 years, so 2027 to 2036. So when I talk about the big numbers, that's using the 10-year projections. The title of this bill is H.R. 7567, the Farm, Food, and National Security Act of 2026. That is a pretty big title. Presumptive, right? That's, yeah, they think highly of themselves, don't they? It was introduced in February 13th by the chairman of the Agriculture Committee, and I think that's just a formality, Congressman G.T. Thompson. It passed the Agriculture Committee in the House on March 4th. The chairman intends to bring it to a whole House vote by April 5th. Then at that point, it will cross over to the Senate, where they will make some edits. Hopefully, we'll talk about that in this episode, but hopefully some of those edits will be in favor of things that are more beneficial to small farmers. We'll talk about that. Once the Senate side votes on it, assuming it passes, which it should at that point, because we're supposed to figure that out. It's called going to conference, and they just negotiate the Farm Bill between the House and the Senate versions. Then it goes to the president to get signed. And the timeline on that, we could make predictions, but it doesn't really matter. The 2023 Farm Bill was absolutely going to pass, and then it wasn't. So I'm just going to say the timeline on the passage of this bill really depends on the political winds, what else is going on, and where that political will is. All right, so let's get into the meat of this year's bill. And remember, this is a huge funding bill. It grants approximately $1.4 trillion from fiscal year 2027 to 2036. And I'll break down a little bit of those numbers, but I'm not fixated on the numbers here. We're just looking at like a big picture stuff. About 70% of all of that funding goes towards SNAP. Another about 11% goes to crop subsidies. And the rest goes to fund the ongoing costs, grant programs, and much more, including the things we're going to talk about. All right. So some of the good stuff. It's always good to start with that, right? Section 12114. It's a pilot program to support custom slaughter exemptions. This provision allows states to implement up to 5 custom slaughter custom exempt slaughter facilities per state. And what does this mean? I've written about this extensively, and I will write more about this as the Farm Bill moves forward. Basically, I'm a huge fan of this. It will help to create infrastructure for local slaughter options. All right. Really let that sink in. It's a small step forward, but it is in the right direction. We need that infrastructure for local slaughter options. Absolutely. Like that is food security right there. If we don't have that, food security is a lot harder, a lot harder. So this is really positive. It's small scale. It's questionable how hard of an impact it's going to have, but it is in the right direction. It's a pilot program. So if this goes well for 5 years, they do more. We are losing our beef herds, and that's in part due to the higher processing costs and the wait times. And this one provision, it will do a lot to help restore local options. So let's keep an eye on that. All right. Now, something similar, different sections, similar. So section 6304, it's new, mobile, and expanded meat processing and rendering grants. Again, a step in the right direction. Oh, let me get back to that other section real quick. So what that other one does is it expands an already existing exemption for in-state slaughter and sale. So this does not necessarily have a budget attached to it, because it's just saying, hey, states, you can do this thing and we're not going to ban it. You can just use this existing exemption. So that's a states' rights issue, states, and the states will have to fund that. Now, this other section, 6304, the new mobile and expanded meat processing and rendering grants, this portion allocates up to $500,000 grants for small-scale mobile slaughtering options for niche markets. So like kosher, halal meats. I'm sure there's other provisions that can be under that. Again, a small step in the right direction. And depending on the amount awarded to each grantee, it can cover 75 to 90% of associated costs for setting up or expanding these mobile meat processing and rendering grants. This allocates, the bill, as it's written now, allocates $3 million per year for each of 5 years. That's great. You do the math, though. That's a maximum of 30 small-scale facilities each year. It is a tiny step in the right direction, but we also need many hundreds of small-scale slaughter options locally in our rural communities, everywhere, for actual food security. All right, so the third thing, we have section 4306. This is local farmers feeding our communities program. It sounds awesome, and I went ahead and put this under the good category because it does have the potential to do some good for our small-scale farmers, to create local food security. It does have that potential. It helps fund local food distribution in a few ways. The language is vague, so it's not clear how much impact this will have directly on small-scale farmers versus larger entities that are still technically local. So think of it this way. If a school wants to start serving local something, then they might get help paying for that food through this program, but it might still be like a big CAFO egg operation, for example, that is getting that funding. Does that make sense? So that grants up to $200 million per year in funding towards this. And that's not insignificant. For small-scale farmers, for those who are really on the edge or super tight margins, that amount can transform a farm. Like the amount, not $200 million, obviously, but the amount towards direct sales could transform it. And hey, Sherry, good to see you on here. And hey, guys, if you have any questions as I go through this, just drop them in the chat. I'm going to try to address your questions as they come up. Again, I want to say that I'm focusing on a small portion of the Farm Bill. I'm not currently in this episode. I'm not covering the farm subsidies section of the Farm Bill or the nutrition, the supplement program, SNAP. And I'm also not really commenting on the dietary guidelines. I can do that in a separate one, but that's a lot for a 30, 40-minute live video. So I'm just covering an outline of the good things in here and things to keep an eye on that are really sketchy in the Farm Bill. All right, let's look at another one. Now we're going to get into the bad and the very bad. And honestly, like I really struggled with what's just bad and what's really awful, because so much of this is, thanks, Sherry. So much of this is overlapping, bad and terrible. And let's keep an eye on it because it could be terrible. So we've got section 12006, ensuring the free movement of livestock-derived products in interstate commerce. All right, guys, it sounds great and it sounds pro-farmer and it sounds all these things, but it's not, all right? And let's get into why. Let's just say the Interstate Commerce Clause is so badly abused in our food system. Interstate Commerce Clause is the justification for not allowing raw milk to be transported across state lines. It's the justification for different price settings and many constraints on farms, many, many, many. So anytime you see interstate commerce being invoked, that's a red flag, that's alarm bells. Look at it more, look at it closely. So what this one does is some states implemented rules for animals in confinement. So I'm going to use the term CAFO. And to be clear about what that means, a CAFO is a confinement animal feeding operation. And we've all seen videos and pictures of what that looks like. Tons of chickens packed in a chicken house, pigs packed so close together, their tails get cut off. We know what that looks like, all right? So some states implemented rules that animals in confinement had to have a certain amount of space. And those who have compassion for animals, even if we eat them, understand this is a good thing. Animal welfare matters and humane practices matter. So some states implemented rules saying that animals had to have a certain amount of space. And this rule in the Farm Bill overturns that. It's using the Interstate Commerce Clause to strip states of the state rights to set provisions limiting the confinement, the enclosure of certain animals. All right? It's terrible. That is terrible. And yeah, I mean, I also like, I want to say I understand this from a conventional farming side of things, but this is just inhumane. It's terrible. All right. Now we're going to go to section 10205. All right. I know that this is going to make some people's blood boil, but there's no way around this. This is titled The Uniformity of Pesticide Labeling Requirements. Remember that executive order that Trump signed like a month ago about giving immunity to the glyphosate companies, and how that was a horrible, and RFK, he supported that. And that was a horrible betrayal of basically the entire, everybody who voted for them under the MAHA umbrella, because it's awful. Like if a company is creating a product that is causing, I'm not making any declarations here, but if they're creating a product that's causing harm to people, then we have a right to be made right about that. And Trump's executive order gave them immunity, among other things. And so an executive order can change in the next administration, but there is this section in the Farm Bill that codifies that executive order that gives the immunity to chemical companies. Do we need to talk about how bad this is? Like glyphosate, all right, that's the big one, glyphosate, because Bayer, the chemical company that bought Monsanto, that creates that product, they have 700 and something billion settlement against or in favor of the people who were harmed by glyphosate. So obviously the courts believe that there's enough of a link between glyphosate and harm that they had to pay out this huge settlement. Now, the Farm Bill is codifying the immunity against those chemical companies. Hopefully, and we all have a say in this, hopefully this provision will not stay in the final version of the Farm Bill. But I can imagine that it will become a political fight. In the meantime, you need to protect yourself from the chemicals. Don't use them, and be careful what you buy. Now, all right, we're still in the bad and the very bad. Section 6302. And by the way, for all these section names, I'm going to be putting these in the notes, so you don't have to remember any of this. It'll be in the notes. But I think it is important and valuable to pinpoint where this is in the legislation and what it means and the titles. So I'm really giving this to you so you are informed about it and you know what it means, but you don't have to remember all the nitty-gritty details of that. But hey, is this making sense so far? Do you want some more in-depth on any of the items I've already covered? If so, just put it in the comments and I'll talk about one section more or not. Okay, so 6302, promoting precision agriculture, increased payments for precision agriculture practices. This sounds great. It's not. Precision agriculture is an umbrella term, and this is really sugar-coated. But precision agriculture means, for example, that if a farm is spraying, let's just use glyphosate because we've been talking about it. If a farm is spraying glyphosate, then they can use AI and really specialized equipment to spray a little bit less glyphosate, or to skip this little section of the field and focus on these other sections of the field. And same thing with water. So maybe a farm is using X number of gallons of water in a certain area. Precision agriculture says, oh, they can be more conservative, but it requires the use of AI and big tech. And basically what this section of the bill does is it incentivizes through increasing the amount of reimbursement to 90% of the costs associated with adopting precision agriculture practices and acquiring the precision agriculture technology for the purpose of implementing conservation practices. All of that is code for big tech taking over certain aspects of farming, or farmers giving data over to big tech. So they're trying, the big tech companies, they're trying to get all possible data on farming techniques and the actual land. So if this, you guys, it's actually really scary how many of these tools exist and how many of them are being used to track like what's under the soil, what kind of soil is it. Watch out for this one. I believe this is a Trojan horse and hands all our farming and farmland data over to big tech. And that doesn't mix very well. All right, so there are several sections that go into water and water use. This includes groundwater and wastewater and surface water. And I will just say we need to keep an eye on all of those provisions. One thing I'm really concerned about is how much water the data centers are using. Data centers are squeezing out farms in two different ways, well, multiple different ways, but really putting the squeeze on them, both in land acquisition. So land is being stripped away from farms to use to build the data centers or the infrastructure to support the data centers, such as like laying wires for them and water. I mean, data centers need so much water. So farms are just getting pushed off their land. And the amount of water that the data centers consume and need, it's horrendous. It's like, oh, I don't even want to get the numbers. I don't want to get them wrong, but huge amounts, I think 300,000 gallons of water per day for some of the mid to larger data centers. Guys, that's per day. That's coming out of the aquifers. It's coming out of the land water that our farms need. So when you think about what's happening in different areas that our food is grown, think about out west and think about how scarce water is already. And then you look at the map of the data centers, and I'll try to put that in the written version of this. But with the map of the data centers and what we already know about how scarce water is in some places, then this gets really sketchy. These sections of the Farm Bill that address water, wastewater, groundwater, it gets really sketchy. So we've got to keep an eye on these. I'll keep an update on the water sections and what some of that means and how it's going to impact our rural communities, how it's going to impact what farms still have access to. That's the scary part, because look, I mean, if you're thinking about it on a household level, you're like, oh, the water gets to me through the city or whatever. But when you think about the ways that farms irrigate, you need that water and it's not always there. So we got to keep an eye on this part of the Farm Bill, how it's going to impact everyone. So important. I'll keep updating about it. But that is the quick update of the Farm Bill and what is going on with everything, what it all means. So does anybody have any questions? And I can address some of them, or what are you looking out for in the Farm Bill? What have you already seen? Have you seen any articles that make you go, what's going on here? Or what are you most concerned about? Adam, if you're still on, I'd especially love to hear your perspective, because I know you're coming from a different sector of agriculture. And maybe it all makes sense and nobody has questions about it, which is fine too. Or if there's a particular section you want addressed next time. Well, I guess that's it for this time. Thank you all for joining and for your comments. And I'll update. Danny, the connection between big tech and big ag is scary. And this becomes more about control of our food systems. Absolutely. And, that's where I think that's where it really matters what we do, how we interact with this, what we're looking at, because it's food systems, yes, but what does that translate to? It translates to our food security. That means, do you have food for your table? If yes, what kind of food is it? And is it actually going to nourish you, or is it just going to nourish the big companies when you buy it? So as we get farm bills like this, that more and more control goes to the big companies, big tech, big ag, less and less is it truly about us. So you're right. It is about control of our food systems. Absolutely. And getting a lot of it digitized and a lot of it data driven. And yes, and also it's about big pharma. It's all interconnected. Absolutely. 100%. And when you think about the integration of these CAFO operations and how reliant they are on big pharma with vaccinating all the animals and keeping all the animals confined, and then the antibiotics that they're on, you see how much big ag relies on big pharma as well. And Adam, I'd love to dive into some of the precision ag stuff, because I know that there are components of it that have a positive outlook, but I think a big picture and long-term, it's a big data grab. So really eager to hear your thoughts on that and get into some of the nuance of it, that it's not all bad, but what happens next? So, and what do we have control over, right? Because ultimately it's like, what do we have a control over? That is the bottom line. And it's why we even pay attention to any of this, and why we care about any of this, because at the end of the day, who are we? We control the food that comes into our households and the food that we consume. So that is something we have really tangible control over. And as we make different choices, and as we support small farms and farms that are moving in the direction of more organic or less inputs, we get to have a say in how some of these things move forward. It doesn't all have to be based on the all right, Adam. Total data grab. All right. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that more. But it's really up to us what we bring into our households, how we nourish our bodies. And I see Robert Scott Bell joined, as he would say, and if you haven't checked out his podcast, definitely do. As he would say, the power to heal is yours. It really, truly is. Whether or not this farm bill passes the way it is, it's likely to, maybe with a couple of provisions taken out on the Senate side, but it is very likely to pass the way it is with all of these horrible parts in it. So keep an eye on it, guys. Stay tuned. See what that means for your food security. And thanks for being here. All right, I will catch you all next time. Oh, another question. All right. So, Danny, you asked, do you know that when changes are made in the US, does this trickle into other countries' agriculture and food systems, for example, Canada? That's a really good question. And I'm going to look into that more, because I know an entire section of the Farm Bill focuses on exports. And I know that we have to change some things for that export market. And of course, I mean, here's what I'm going to say about the changes in the US. What I'm going to say is that the ideological shifts actually matter more than the policy shifts. Does that make sense? And that means that, like, as people are like, oh, glyphosate, no big deal. And so if the other countries can hang on to their ideologies of like local, fresh, wholesome food, then it's less likely for these kinds of provisions to take root in those countries. Does that make sense? But I'm going to look into some of the export provisions in the Farm Bill so that I have a better grasp on that for next time. And we can chat about it offline as well. All right, cool. And by the way, if there's if you're listening to this at any time and there's a particular topic you'd like me to cover, or provision in the Farm Bill that you're curious about, then just put it in the comments or shoot an email and I'll get to it. All right. Thanks so much, you all.